What happens when Hollywood's ultimate tough guy faces off with television's sharpest tongue, and things go completely off the rails? Tonight, we're diving into one of the most unforgettable clashes in late-night history, a fiery exchange so intense that security had to intervene. This is the story of how Clint Eastwood, the man who built an empire out of steely stares and legendary one-liners, ended up in a heated showdown with David Letterman that ended with the movie icon being escorted off the set. Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe and drop your thoughts below, because this story twists in ways that'll make you rethink everything you thought you knew about these two legends. The Ed Sullivan Theater was alive with its usual pre-show buzz. The crowd chatted excitedly, anticipating a night to remember. Clint Eastwood, then at the peak of his directorial prestige, was set to appear on The Late Show to promote his latest film. What began as a simple promotional visit would soon spiral into one of television's most talked-about moments. David Letterman strode onto the stage with his trademark gap-toothed grin, soaking in the crowd's energy as he delivered his opening monologue. The audience's excitement was electric. They were about to see one of Hollywood's most respected figures take the guest chair. Letterman, known for making even seasoned stars squirm with his witty unpredictability, was about to meet his match. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began with his familiar teasing tone, "our first guest tonight has been making movies for more than 4 decades. He's directed and starred in some of the most iconic westerns ever made. He's won Oscars, and he's probably the only man in Hollywood who makes me feel short. Please welcome Clint Eastwood." The crowd erupted as Eastwood stepped out, his tall, commanding figure exuding the same calm authority that defined his career. Each deliberate step, each nod to the audience, felt pure Eastwood. The applause went on endlessly before he finally took his seat beside Letterman. "Clint, great to have you here," Letterman said with a seemingly warm smile. "I've been watching your movies since I was a kid. Tell me, do you ever get tired of people asking you to say, 'Make my day'?" Eastwood gave a slow nod, his gravelly voice filling the room. "Well, Dave, I guess if people still want to hear it after all these years, I must have done something right. Though I'll admit, it gets old when a grocery store clerk throws it at me while bagging my groceries." The crowd laughed, and Letterman seemed pleased with the exchange. "You've been doing this a long time, directing, acting. Be honest, when you're behind the camera, are you as tough on your actors as Dirty Harry was on Criminals?" "I like to think I'm fair," Eastwood replied calmly, shifting in his chair. "But I don't have patience for unprepared people or wasted time. Time's money, and more than that, it's something you don't get back." Letterman nodded, but his grin hinted at mischief. "That's interesting," he said, "because I heard a story about you and one of your co-stars. Maybe you can clear it up for us." Eastwood's eyes narrowed, a tiny movement that fans of his films knew all too well. "What story would that be, Dave?" "Well," Letterman said, his tone dipping into that familiar, provocative rhythm, "I heard during one of your recent films you had, let's say, a disagreement with your leading lady. Something about her method acting clashing with your direct style." The crowd felt the shift instantly, light-hearted chatter turning into charged silence. Eastwood straightened, his jaw tightening. "Dave, I'm not sure where you're getting that," he said evenly. "But you might want to double-check your sources. I've worked with a lot of professionals, and I've always treated them with respect." Letterman either didn't pick up on the warning or chose to ignore it. "Oh, come on, Clint. We're all adults here. I'm not digging for gossip. I'm just curious how a no-nonsense guy like you handles actors who like to find their character for 20 minutes before saying a line." Eastwood's expression didn't change, but his voice dropped lower. "My reputation," he said slowly, "comes from making good movies and working with people who take the job seriously. I'm not here to discuss private conversations or creative disagreements." The tension was thick. The audience went silent. Even Letterman hesitated for a beat before offering a mock surrender. All right, he said with a laugh, just giving the audience a little peek into your process. He quickly shifted gears. Since we're talking about your work, do you ever watch your old movies and cringe a little? Eastwood's posture softened slightly. Any artist looks back and sees things they might do differently, but I don't dwell on the past. I focus on what's ahead. That's very zen of you, Letterman smirked, but the glint in his eye said he wasn't done. Speaking of the past, though, you've never been afraid to voice your opinions, have you? And that's when it happened. The interview turned from casual to confrontational. Eastwood's gaze locked on Letterman, that unmistakable look from 1,000 Western standoffs. "Dave," he said, voice low and deliberate, "you might want to be careful where this conversation's going." The room froze. Letterman, misreading the moment or maybe just pushing for drama, leaned forward with a sly grin. "Come on, Clint," he said. "We're just talking here." "I'm talking about some of your, let's say, more colorful political comments over the years," Letterman said, his grin turning sharp. "You've never exactly kept your views to yourself, have you?" Eastwood's reply was calm, but his body language told a different story. His hands rested on the arms of his chair, steady, but the faint tension in his knuckles betrayed his irritation. "My political opinions are my own business, Dave," he said firmly. "I came here to talk about my film, not to debate politics with a late-night host." The room fell silent. Gone was the usual hum of laughter and movement that filled the studio. Even the camera operators seemed frozen, aware they were capturing something extraordinary. But Letterman couldn't stop himself. He leaned in slightly, voice dipping into provocation. "But that's the thing, Clint. You've made your politics part of your public image. You've endorsed candidates, made speeches, and had that famous empty chair moment. Surely, you can't be shocked that people want to talk about it." Eastwood's jaw tightened, and when he spoke, his words carried the same quiet, dangerous energy that had once made villains tremble on screen. "That conversation, as you call it, was a creative choice at a political event. It had nothing to do with my work, and it definitely has nothing to do with why I'm sitting in this chair tonight." Letterman pushed on, ignoring the warning in Eastwood's tone. "But it does, doesn't it? I mean, when you're as big a star as you are, everything about you becomes part of the public record, your art, your opinions, your life. It's all fair game." Eastwood's voice dropped low, so quiet it was almost a whisper, yet somehow more intimidating than a shout. "Fair game," he repeated. "Let me tell you something about fair game, Dave. Fair game is when both sides know the rules before they play. What you're doing right now isn't fair game. It's an ambush." For a split second, Letterman's smile faltered, then returned, a little forced. "An ambush? Come on, Clint, we're on television. This is what we do. We talk about current events. We discuss the world. Your opinions are part of that world." Eastwood straightened slightly in his seat, his presence filling the stage. "My opinions," he said, voice deep and steady, "come from a lifetime of experience, from watching this country evolve, from working with people from every walk of life. They're not meant to be chopped into sound bites for your entertainment." The tension was electric. Even Letterman's band had fallen completely silent, their instruments untouched. The audience didn't move. They were watching history unfold in real time. "Look, Clint," Letterman said finally, his voice softening, "I'm not trying to attack you here. I'm asking what everyone else wants to know. You're a public figure. People are curious. They want to understand where you're coming from." Eastwood's voice rose slightly, not loud, but powerful enough to cut through the silence. "Do they really want to understand, or do you want a viral moment for your show? You want the clip of Clint Eastwood losing his temper on your highlight reel tomorrow morning?" For the first time that night, Letterman looked genuinely shaken. His face reddened slightly. "That's not what this is about," he said quickly. "Isn't it?" Eastwood shot back, leaning forward, his eyes narrowed to that legendary squint. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you brought me here to discuss my film, and now you're trying to turn this into political theater." "I'm just doing my job," Letterman said, but there was little conviction in his tone. "Your job," Eastwood replied coldly, "is to entertain, to make people laugh, maybe even make them think. But it's not your job to play gotcha with your guests, especially those who come here in good faith." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop. Letterman, the man who'd handled countless difficult guests, looked visibly out of his depth. "Clint, I think you're overreacting," he said, trying to regain control. "We're just having a conversation. If you'd rather not talk about politics, we can switch topics." "Overreacting," Eastwood repeated, his voice low but loaded with danger. "You ambush me with questions about my personal beliefs, twist my creative choices into punchlines, and when I call you out, I'm overreacting." Letterman lifted his hands in a placating gesture. "I'm just saying we can move on if this makes you uncomfortable." "Uncomfortable?" Eastwood stood up, his full height towering over the seated host. His shadow seemed to swallow the desk. "Dave, I've been uncomfortable plenty of times, hanging off cliffs doing my own stunts, directing actors who didn't want to listen, standing in rooms full of people who hated my politics. But you know what I've never been uncomfortable with? Standing up for myself when someone tries to make me look like a fool." The crowd gasped as camera operators scrambled to reframe the shot. Letterman remained seated, his usual composure cracking. "No one's trying to make you look foolish," he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. "Then what would you call this?" Eastwood snapped. "You invite me here to talk about my film, and instead, you drag me into some kind of political cross-examination. If that's not an attempt to make me look like a fool, what is it?" The studio was dead silent. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed louder than the crowd. Letterman opened his mouth, but no words came. "I'll tell you what it is," Eastwood said, his tone calm but thunderous. "It's cheap. It's lazy television, treating guests like props for your ratings instead of human beings, and I'm not going to play along." With that, he began unhooking his microphone, slow, deliberate, and final. Everyone in the studio knew this moment would be replayed for years. "Clint, wait," Letterman pleaded as he watched Eastwood pulling off the mic pack. "Let's just take a second here. We don't need to end it like this." Eastwood paused, looking at him with those same piercing eyes that had stared down 1,000 outlaws. "End it like what, Dave? With honesty? With someone finally calling you out for turning an interview into a circus?" "That's not what this is," Letterman protested, standing up now, palms out. "Look, maybe I pushed a little too hard. Maybe I asked the wrong questions, but we're both professionals here. We can fix this." "Professionals," Eastwood repeated, his tone dripping with irony. Eastwood let out a low, bitter laugh. "A professional, huh? A professional would have respected that I came here to talk about my work, not to be turned into a political punching bag. A professional would have done his homework, asked about the craft of filmmaking, about the story I'm trying to tell, about the incredible people I worked with on this project." The audience was transfixed, holding their breath as the tension filled the studio like static electricity. A few audience members instinctively raised their phones, though security would later make sure no footage escaped the theater that night. Everyone in that room knew they were witnessing television history, live and unfiltered. Letterman took a cautious step forward, his tone softening. "You're right, Clint. You're absolutely right. I should have stayed focused on your movie, on your directing process, your cast, your creative vision. Let's start over. Please just sit down and we'll talk about what you came here to discuss." Eastwood shook his head slowly, no words, no anger, just a deliberate motion that carried more weight than any shouted response. "Dave, you don't get to rewind the tape. You don't get to erase the last 15 minutes and pretend they didn't happen. You showed your true colors tonight, and now I'm showing mine." Letterman hesitated. "What's that supposed to mean?" he asked, though the unease in his voice revealed he already knew. "It means," Eastwood said firmly, I don't work with people I can't trust. And right now, Dave, I wouldn't trust you as far as I could throw you, which, at my age, isn't very far." The line drew a few nervous laughs from the audience, but the tension didn't break. If anything, Eastwood's calm composure made the entire exchange feel even more intense, like the quiet before a gunfight. Letterman tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "Clint, please. I've been doing this show for years. I've talked with thousands of guests. Sometimes things get a little heated, sometimes we cross lines, that's what makes good television. But that doesn't mean we can't pull things back." "Good television," Eastwood repeated, raising an eyebrow as if he genuinely couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You think ambushing your guests makes good television? You think humiliating someone who came here in good faith makes for great ratings?" "I think honest conversations make for good television," Letterman said, but the confidence was gone from his voice. "Honest?" Eastwood echoed, the word laced with quiet disdain. "There's nothing honest about what just happened here. You had an agenda from the second I walked out. You wanted me to say something controversial, something you could turn into a headline for your show tomorrow. That's not honesty, Dave. That's manipulation." The silence that followed was suffocating. Letterman just stood there, his trademark smirk gone, while Eastwood continued to remove his microphone, each motion deliberate, each click of the mic pack echoing in the stillness. "You know what's funny?" Eastwood said, though there was no humor in his tone. "I've been in this business for over 50 years. I've dealt with studio execs who tried to cheat me, directors who tried to humiliate me, critics who tried to tear me apart. But I've never had someone invite me into their home and then try to make me look like a fool in front of millions." "That wasn't my intention," Letterman said weakly. "Your intention," Eastwood's voice rose for the first time, sharp and clear. "Your intention was to use me to make a moment, something for your highlight reel. Well, congratulations, Dave. You got your moment. People will definitely be talking about this." Behind the cameras, the producers were in full panic mode, waving frantically at the stage manager. The entire operation had spiraled out of control, and there was no saving it now. Letterman noticed the chaos at the edge of the stage and seemed to realize the magnitude of what was happening. "Clint, come on. Maybe we both said some things we didn't mean. We got carried away, sure, but we're live. There's an audience here, people watching at home. Can't we just end this on a better note?" Eastwood had finished detaching his microphone. He held it in his hand, staring at it like it represented everything wrong with the situation. "You want to end this on a better note," he said slowly. "Here, how we do that, Dave. You learned something from tonight. You learned that guests aren't props for your entertainment. You learned that when someone sits across from you, you treat them with respect, not as a character to poke at for ratings." "I hear you," Letterman said quickly, nodding. "You're right. I should have been more respectful. I should have stuck to questions about your film." "Should've, could've, would've," Eastwood said, setting the microphone down on Letterman's desk with a sharp, echoing thud. "That's the story of a lot of lives, Dave. But here's the thing about should have, it doesn't mean a damn thing once the moment's gone." He turned toward the audience. For a moment, it looked like he might speak directly to them, and then he did. His voice carried clearly across the silent studio, rich and resonant even without a mic. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "I'm sorry you had to see this. You came here expecting entertainment, and instead you got a lesson in what happens when television forgets its responsibility to its guests and to its audience." With that, Clint Eastwood began walking toward the exit, each step steady, deliberate, final. He was nearly off stage when he paused and turned back toward Letterman one last time. "You know, Dave," he said, his voice calm but cold, "in all my years making westerns, the bad guys always thought they were clever. They try to win with tricks and cheap shots. But there's one thing they never understood, and apparently, neither do you." Letterman swallowed hard. "What's that?" he asked quietly. Eastwood's eyes narrowed into that iconic squint, his voice steady as stone. You can't outdraw a man who refuses to play your game. And with that, Clint Eastwood walked off the Late Show stage, leaving behind a silent audience, a shaken host, and a moment that would echo through television history. The cameras kept rolling. Letterman stood frozen behind his desk, staring down at the microphone Clint had left behind. The only sound in the room was the fading echo of Eastwood's footsteps disappearing into the wings. What made it truly extraordinary wasn't that Clint Eastwood walked off a major talk show, it was how he did it. Calm, controlled, with dignity and conviction. He turned what could have been a public meltdown into a masterclass in self-respect, a reminder that integrity still means something, even when the whole world is watching. So what do you think of this legendary showdown between two entertainment icons? Was Eastwood right to walk away, or was Letterman just doing his job? Drop your thoughts below, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible stories about the moments when Hollywood's biggest stars showed their true colors.